So it's great to start with some mistake. तो फिर नजर नहीं लगती है. So I was supposed to sit here for some reason. So now I'm here. Um, it is so wonderful to be in this conversation with you about a subject that I have spent my time on a lot over the last 3 years also. So I am going to start with the idea behind this series of books that we will be having the next 40 minutes of conversation about. And I'm going to just right away give you the mic and ask you to talk about what is this series about. And because this is a series that we will be talking about. It looks like this, but it's extremely readable and a wonderful collection. So let's start from there.
Well, I wrote a book called India Unbound, and it was this book about 1991 economic reforms, Nehruvian socialism and all that. And frankly, Penguin found suddenly that this book was selling well, which was meant to be, they thought was a book on economics, but it turned, and the reason for the success, of course, is the stories. That was built out of stories of lived experience, not AI created stories. And so they suggested that we create and originally the idea was half a dozen books, and these books started coming out right from the Arthashastra and to the Marwadis and the Sindhis and East India Company and so on, and the Roman trade. So every few years we've had a book, and I've always looked for the best writer, the authority in the subject. And the odd thing is that 80% of the authors have turned out to be foreigners. Even the Marwadis is not written by a Marwadi. It's a guy called Tom Timberg who wrote his PhD thesis at Harvard on the Marwadis and wrote a very successful book afterwards. And he's authored that. And so the problem, of course, when you have authors writing, we have a conflict back there.
There is another session going on there, if we can. Yeah.
Not a session, it's a rather loud conversation. Yeah. Anyway, the point is that all academics are not good writers, I'm sorry to say. And so my biggest challenge was to make them think not theory, but stories, which is a way to communicate. And India is the oldest storytelling culture in the world. So that's really how it all began. And now it's reached 17 volumes, and 10 of these are here from the bookstore that Crossword has lent us today.
And so I just heard that the announcement said 14, and you've already gone up to 17. And with the number of stories that we have, we don't know where this is going to stop, but it's really a wonderful journey. We'll get to the stories, but before that, because you're here and you're a writer, and this festival is all about writing and reading, I want you to also tell us a little bit about your process of writing. Like, you're so prolific. You have written and you have curated this collection with so many different writers. You've collaborated from people across the world. What is it like? What's your day like?
Well, for the last 30 years, I've been a full-time writer. And before that, for the previous 30 years, I was a weekend writer when I wore 2 hats, Monday to Friday hat and a Saturday, Sunday hat. And my writing, my schedule of the day is I write from 6 to 12, and 6 in the morning till 12 in the noon, and then I go for a swim to sort of loosen up the body, which has been sitting on the computer. But the process is very simple. First, I make sure in the mornings I don't do anything that puts me on someone else's agenda. meaning I don't do email, I don't do WhatsApp, I don't read the newspaper. So I'm very selfish that way. I don't do yoga because I might meet somebody or take a walk with someone. All good things you're supposed to do, but not in the morning. The second, so that's the discipline. The second part of writing, I envy people who write, with great felicity, great facility. It's a pain. If I'll tell you, you have to be a bit of a masochist to become a writer because it's hard work. And in my case, I'm a addictive rewriter. My wife, in fact, often introduces me not as a writer, but as a rewriter. Because I see a paragraph, I stop and I say, now in the morning I start and say, let me see where I ended up yesterday. So I'm reading those last two paragraphs and I start changing those. And so I'm spending instead of quickly reading them, I'm spent first hour rewriting them. And so, but I think it gets better. And so what I want to say is that writing is a struggle. Yes, there are rewards at the end if your books sell well, and but it's don't have illusions about nirvana. It's a hard road to nirvana. Writing a book. In my case, of course, I just want to make sure I get the right word. I mean, that's where my problem with AI is, that AI doesn't go through the struggle that I go through. And so I'm very envious of AI's ability to deliver in 2 seconds everything.
So we will listen to a lot of the stories from him, and for the rest you will read the books. But I just do want to bring Naushad into the conversation and ask you, because you wrote a book and we had a nice conversation about that, a few years ago. And do tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm not as disciplined as Gurcharan. First of all, it would be impossible for me to get up at 6 in the morning and do anything productive. So my style for writing was to actually find chunks of time and then allocate it in whichever day I could make that time. And I did find that you need a certain amount of dead time, of just letting things stew. And then when you start writing, it becomes easier. At least for me, I found that I needed at least a 2 to 3 hour chunk for me to do anything productive in terms of writing. In terms of rewriting, I fully agree. I think rewriting is a greatly underappreciated skill. There's a session this evening on P.G. Wodehouse, and P.G. Wodehouse, I think, is one of the great writers of all time. And P.G. Wodehouse, there was this description in his autobiography of how he wrote, and he would type his books on an old, if I remember correctly, Remington typewriter, and a page at a time. And he would put the page up around the room, and then he would rewrite page by page, and each page that he rewrote, he would paste either above or below that particular page. And if it was above, he liked it more. And then when he figured he was done, he would just go around the room and collect the top page from the room. And that was his finished chapter. But he would, in some cases, you get this idea when you read him that it was completely effortless, because his way with language is so perfect.
Yes.
It's not. It's
Rewriting.
The reflection of lots of rewriting, lots of hard work. And when I worked on my book, I mean, I tried very hard to find the right quote, the right joke, the right cartoon, because that's what you want to do. You want to do the best job you possibly can with the writing, and I think rewriting is an essential part of it.
Amazing. So, as a new writer, I'm taking notes. I'm being selfish. But I'm now moving to something for which we are all here, which is to listen to you, sir. Give us some of the stories that are so incredible in your book. And maybe we start with something from, because it's a lot of history that has been documented in these books. So maybe we start with something really interesting in our history, which connects us to the rest of the world, because the theme of us being a global civilization is a very important one for you. So let's start with the story of what we taught the world, which is most important.
Yeah. So, today we glibly say India sone ki chidiya thi. And we were a very wealthy country. And we leave it at that. But these books show you that how we actually were one of the great trading empires in the world. And we were, with a 5,000 miles coastline, we really created enormous wealth by trading. And that is something we forgot when we became independent. Anyway, it begins really, and I don't know where to start, but let's begin with the fact, let's go back to the Roman Empire. One ship from Rome would arrive at a South Indian port every day. And the Romans would buy lot of Indian, usual, as always, textiles, cottons, and they bought perfumes, they bought pepper, and the Roman women had got very fond of, they discovered pepper from India actually. And so...
And muslin.
And actually Pliny was a famous senator, and he got up in the Senate in Rome, and he says to the Romans, stop wearing those togas. Tell your women to stop cooking with pepper. What is this business of pepper in everything that we are putting in? And stop using Indian perfumes, because we are losing 68% of Rome's gold and silver, our bullion, to India. Or you Romans sell something to the Indians that they want. The point that he is making is really what Mr. Trump is making today about America. It's the trade deficit. And India had a positive trade surplus with the world right up to the Industrial Revolution in a couple of 100 years ago. And also, if you go by Madison's figures, it was 25% of world trade, 28% of world GDP. I mean, this was what the United States basically is today. India was. But why? And why is because of our openness. And Rome is only one example of it. In the middle, when East India Company came, East India Company introduced to the Europeans at that time fine Dhaka muslin. Mm-hmm. And for the first time, the Europeans discovered the wearing of underwear, because they had only wool or coarse cotton, which was unsuitable for underwear. Originally, the aristocracy could afford it only, and it began with the aristocracy. But in the 19th century, it became a mass. Middle class grew. The middle class started wearing underwear. And the 20th century was a mass consumer century, and everybody started wearing underwear. But underwear began with the discovery of fine Indian cotton. Now, I could go on
Sure.
and on with uh, stories like this.
So I also want you to talk just one more story, at least before we move on to the next part of the conversation, and that's the story you were telling me about startups. There's something
Yeah.
which is,
You know, today we live in the world of startups, and India has done well. 100 of our startups or more have become unicorns, meaning $1 billion in size. And the reality is that there's a 13th century Kashmiri anthology of stories called Katha Sarit Sagara. And in this Sanskrit anthology is a story of a mouse merchant. And if you don't mind, I'll take a minute and a half
Sure.
to tell you this story. It's about a boy who becomes 17 years old, and his mother tells him, "Now I've educated you, son, and I want you to grow up to do something. You have destiny," she says, "to do something else and not be like me." She has been cleaning houses. She's a widow, and she's been cleaning houses, and she says, "You're going to do something else." And so she says, "Over there is the house of the richest man in town, and he's a kind man. And go and stand outside his house, and when he comes out, ask him for advice." And so the boy dutifully goes the next day, and while he's waiting for the great man to come out, he sees a dead mouse in his courtyard. And so when the man comes out, he says, greets him, and the man says, "What can I do for you?" And the boy says, "Can I have the dead mouse?" And the man laughs. He says, "You'll be doing me a favor, but don't you want anything else? People come to me for a loan or a job." The boy says, "No, thank you." And he takes the dead mouse, and he knows, and he goes away, and he knows a widow who has a cat, and she lives nearby. And he goes with the dead mouse and sells the mouse as cat food to the widow. And with the few paisa that he gets, he goes to the bazaar and buys chana chor garam, a, a snack. And he makes these puriyas of chana chor garam. And he takes a big ghada of pani, of water, and he takes it to the town square, where he sits down and waits. And he knows in the afternoon, loggers come from the forest, and they put down their load, and they rest before they go into the timber market. And at that time, he offers each of them a pani, water, and a snack. And nobody has ever done this to them, but they have no money to give this boy, so each gives him a log of wood. And so he repeats this. He sells one log, gets better snacks the next day, and for the next 3 months he repeats this process until the monsoons come, the logging in the forest stops, the price of wood starts climbing up in the timber market, and he has a house full of logs by then, and he starts unloading his logs of wood in the timber market. And by the end of the season, he's made enough money to buy a shop in the timber market. And he sets himself up then for the next season as a timber merchant. He has one competitive advantage. the suppliers know him. They love him.
Yeah.
Nobody has done what he did for them. And so they bring him the choicest logs first. And so he prospers. And he prospers and so on until he has quite a bit of surplus. When he realizes that actually the margin in converting the logs, the timber, into something else, is the margin is higher. And they live near a shipyard. And so he finds a master carpenter shipbuilder who is now kind of retired. He makes him his partner. And he now enters the shipbuilding business. So he has a subsidiary, which again is successful. And after a few years, he realizes that actually shipping is even more profitable, meaning shipping cargo, shipping passengers. And so he finds a retired captain, ship captain, makes him his partner, and he has a second subsidiary, which also does very well. And by the ripe old age of 24, he has in fact become the richest man in town. And he goes to a jeweler and tells the jeweler to make me a gold mouse. And he takes that gold mouse to the old richest man in town, and he presents it to him as, in today's language, he would say, "This is my return on venture capital," which was the dead mouse.
Yeah.
And the old man, when he hears the story of this boy's life, he's so happy that he gives his daughter in marriage to
Oh,
this
wow. That one story has so many themes of entrepreneurship and capital.
And in today's world, today every youngster dreams of a startup, and this story, it really inspires them. And so what I'm trying to say is that stories like these, I don't know if the Mouse Merchant is here, but it's been translated by Arshia Satar. And she's done a wonderful job of this book, of that book, and stories. But there's another wonderful story from the Panchatantra in the book. We don't think of ourselves as a country which is philanthropic. But in fact, there's another story of two merchants. One is an older merchant who has become successful, and a new one who's starting out. And the young man is asking advice from the old man, and he asks him, and so the older man says, "Look, you've got to learn 4 things if you want to be successful as a businessman. 1, you've got to learn how to make money. 2, if you have learned how to make money, then you must learn how to conserve money. Don't put it under the carpet. You can make it grow. 3rd, you must learn how to spend money." He says businessmen are not good. They don't know. These are different skills. Spending money is a very different skill. They are either, businessmen are too mean or they are too extravagant, and that's not the right way. And 4th, you must learn how to give money away in your lifetime. Now imagine a 2nd century BC text talking about giving money away in your lifetime. So that's just the example of how, this is how we are.
Yeah.
And this is how we were. But we forgot this.
In fact, that is my next landing point on, and we were talking about it at breakfast. This country, with that tradition that you just spoke about, of entrepreneurship, of wealth building, of having an attitude to, to build that wealth, collaboration, and communities, which is what a lot of your book is about. how did I don't want to talk about how did we get to the point where we got to, but I do want to talk about the 90s, which is the period that a lot of your book and Naushad's book talks about. What has been the business community's experience in that period, and what have been the lessons from that from the history of our current phase of liberalization
Right.
and entrepreneurial
Well,
growth?
One quickly, I think when we became independent, we learned the wrong lessons from history. And so the whole stories that I have told, whether it's about the Kutchi merchants, whether it's about the Marwadis, or whether it's about Gigi Boy, Premchand, Roychand, all these are stories of success based on openness. And we closed our economy from the 1950s. We felt that East India Company had made us poor, and that was a sure way to become poor instead of rich. And so that's one lesson, certainly, and only that openness began from 1991 till 1990. From 1951 to 91 was a real betrayal of our young people, frankly. You couldn't have made a startup in that period. You needed a license. And to need a license, you had to take suitcases to Delhi. So, that certainly would be one lesson.
Yeah.
So I agree that the importance of openness, which comes across really powerfully in the whole series. Um, I think one of the principles is, and it's your Roman example. Uh, you cannot be you cannot say I want to export if you don't import. And I think the two are two sides of the same coin. And I think this idea, which President Trump is still to learn, that if you restrict imports, you will restrict exports, is a lesson that we've learned. We've learned since 1991. In fact, economists will tell you that a tax on imports is actually a tax on exports, because of the costs that show up in the processing of goods. But I wanted to come back to the point about business communities and the business communities that this series talks about. Because these business communities were enormously powerful at a time when, and very international, at a time when it was very difficult to be international. I mean, you couldn't take a flight and get somewhere. The journey from when the first British ambassador to India came to India, his journey took 9 months. And he had to time it so that he caught the right winds, because otherwise he may not have reached at all. So it was a difficult thing for people to move around the world, but we did. Community after community, the Parsis in Hong Kong, the Chettiars in Burma. One of the new books is on the Chettiars, and the Chettiars from the current state of Tamil Nadu. At one point in time, there were, I believe, 1,600 Chettiar businesses in Burma, and they owned a quarter of all the arable land in the country. Now, the good bit to learn is openness. The bad bit to learn is that these communities trusted each other, but there wasn't trust between the communities. If you read Sam Dalrymple's book, which was launched yesterday evening, he has his first partition is the partition of Burma from the rest of the Indian Empire at that time, the British Indian Empire. And he describes the very great dislike that the Chettiar community in Burma aroused in the local population. Some of it came from envy. Some of it came because the community, by definition, was somewhat closed. And I think that's a lesson that we should also take, which is that we need to be open as businessmen,
Yes.
to dealing with others on a principle of trust
Yeah.
and well beyond the community, because that's also the 1991 story,
Yeah.
which is that you see the flowering of entrepreneurship and successful businesses of business communities, but you see the flowering of entrepreneurship and business from non-business communities as well, from the IT sector and the pharma sector and from a bunch of new sectors, the FMCG sector, that come in for the first time and really flourish post 1991
Yeah.
because of a much more open system.
Yeah. But you know, Naushad, I'd also argue that, frankly, businessmen and certainly Marwadi businessmen or other communities, you're talking about Chettiar, there's a bad odor around the what a businessman is. And that there are certain people who think instead of wealth creation, they see exploitation. And
We use
I
we
would
use the
just
term
say-
hoarding.
yeah. So I just the point I make is that, and this is a point I think I made actually in India Unbound in the beginning, that something like 60 countries did the same reforms that we did in the 90s.
Yeah.
And the fact is that India became the most successful of the democracies, the free countries. Only China did better in the last 30 years. India has grown at 6.5% from 91. And which, for a democracy. But the reason, the initial spurt, why did India
Yeah.
pick up the baton
Yeah.
so quickly, is that there were people here who knew for centuries, they knew how to grow capital, they knew how to conserve capital. And this is, it's easy to say, to look at a businessman and see an exploiter. But the reality is, it's these people who made it all happen. And after it reached a certain point, then you have the startup phase,
Momentum.
you have all these other effects take over.
Yeah.
So the initial advantage, the first mover advantage came because we had these people. That's what my
Actually,
small point
you
is.
sort of see a sorting of entrepreneurs, and you see a sorting of entrepreneurs from business communities, actually,
Yeah.
where you see the decline of many prominent businesses owned by business communities, and you see the rise of others
Yeah.
who
Exactly.
start doing more and more of the right thing.
Correct.
So I do want to keep like 5 minutes for Q&A, but I wanted to pick on this point of the business communities and the lessons that they have learned, but also about where do we go from here, and what are those lessons about not just opening of the economy but also opening of the mind, because there are various pockets that we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Like political setup, or the bureaucracy, or the deregulation,
Yeah.
or there are so many ideas that are in these books as well as in your other books.
Yeah.
So just give us a little bit about your outlook for the future.
Yeah.
And then we can
Well,
have a question.
the first is the happy part, which I've hinted at already, that before 91, our growth rate was about 3.5%. This rose to 6.5%. Our population growth rate was 2.2. That has come down to 1.6 or something like that.
Under one now.
Under 1 now. So the reality is all that, from being 3.3 to minus 2.1% net per capita income, most of that is going down to the per capita thing. But also, I mean, today we are going through a phase where people are trashing the whole period of globalization. We are going through a phase of nationalism again. And just to take one lesson, that in the last 80 years, has been a period, unprecedented period of the rise of the poor in the world. Just between India and China, over 1 billion people have risen over poverty. India, 428 million people have risen out of poverty. And the middle class in India has gone from 10% to 30%, 35%. And we have not done as well as China, but a lot of it is the result of that openness that led to the creation of jobs. IT was a driving factor in all this. So that's the good side. The bad side of the story is that the job of 91 is still not complete. The reforms are not complete. And why is it that China has done so much better, or the East Asians have done so much better? And really, the one mantra we've learnt in the last 80 years is from the East Asian tigers. It's a one simple: no country became rich without the export of labor-intensive manufactures. Labor meaning, we've talked about textiles. Now, textiles, we had already become the third largest producer of machine textiles by the time we got to independence. But the license Raj actually has killed that whole Bombay and Ahmedabad's textile, and Bangladesh has been a lot more successful, and for various reasons, and which in fact yesterday Subramaniam and Devesh Kapoor talked about that. So the fact is that, bottom line, we have still not created an industrial revolution. And that means that we seem to have skipped from green revolution to an IT revolution. And no country did it without going through the factory stage. And 45% of Indians are still stuck on the farm. And that farm, the agriculture needs about 1/3 of the people that are there.
Yeah.
So that 2/3, we have let them down. So if we want to achieve that Viksit Bharat goal or whatever, this is the job that needs to be done. And Mr. Trump today is our best friend, because he has called us the king of tariffs, which is another word for saying we closed our economy and we have to open up. And we are now, I think, we're going to open up as a result of this. And we know the job that needs to be done in the future. But one quick point, you know, I'm just wondering whether we have
we
time.
don't have
we
much
should go to the
time.
audience.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's because
I really wanted to give the mic to some really young person in the audience who can frame a question in 30 seconds and no more. If you think you qualify for that, get the mic.
there's somebody over there. Yeah, that's.
My question is, would you
Sorry.
classify yourself as libertarian?
Who got the mic?
Would you classify yourself as libertarian? If so, which kind of libertarian? And how far do you think we should take libertarianism? So China would arguably have a larger government than India.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very quick answer. And I'm speaking for both of us.
I'll decide that.
Okay, you decide.
Okay.
He's right. During the license Raj, I was a victim of the license Raj, and that story is here because one year there was a flu, and I was selling Vicks Vapor Rub, and we sold a hell of a lot of Vicks Vapor Rub, and we broke our license, meaning our license allowed us to make only so many tons of Vicks, and there was a 2-year jail sentence associated with disobeying that law.
Making more Vicks Vapor Up than you should.
Exactly. Luckily, I didn't go to
Bad
jail,
boy.
but I became I joined the Swatantra Party, and I
got your
became.
answer.
But I've also then later realized that the state has to play. A libertarian believes in a night watchman state. chowkidar state, law and order only. But I've certainly believed that the state must be responsible for education, health, for a safety net
He is
for the
speaking
poor,
for both of us.
safety net for the poor. I think that's it. So I call myself a classical liberal. A classical liberal is different from a left liberal. Now I'm pointing at her.
Yeah, he pointed
Sorry,
at me, okay? We'll
but there
remember
are
that.
left liberals out there, I can tell you. It's your husband. The fact of the matter is the left liberal distrusts the market. And of course you need regulation, there are market failures, but you also have to realize that there is no other way. Since the collapse of communism in 1989, we have learned this lesson, and we should make capitalism responsible. But yes, to a long answer to your short question, I'm not a libertarian, classical liberal, not a left liberal. And yeah, so libertarian is on one end and left liberals on the other end. Classical liberal is right in the middle. And am I not speaking for you?
Yeah.
Speaking in
Okay.
the center.
Take another question. Take
Yeah.
another question.
Is there another question that can be short
Maybe,
and sweet?
over there on the
Lady
right.
here. Yeah, quick.
So this was a very insightful session, I would say. And my question is, as you are a time-tested entrepreneur, so any one lesson you would like to give to the budding entrepreneurs, which we can have from you today? Thank
Naushad?
you.
Okay. Should we
So
ask
I-
Naushad to give that?
I mean, I think, first of all, I would just say you need a differentiated idea, right? So you need something that people need. And if you identify, as I think the mouse merchant
Yeah,
is a
find
great
the dead
example,
mouse.
right? Find that dead mouse, right?
Find the dead mouse.
Find that dead mouse, and then keep investing, keep building your own differentiated proposition. But start, the skill was in the idea that this boy had to turn a dead mouse into something valuable.
And into capital, because the capital won't always be available to everybody. So it's been a great conversation. I do want to ask everybody to buy this book, because the man himself told me that after writing so many books, this is his favorite book so far. So please do buy the book. And
It's
thank
called
you so
Another
much.
Sort of Freedom.
Yes, it's called Another Sort of Freedom. It's in the bookshop. And of course, read these books. They're valuable. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure so has the audience.